We are on the top of Daf Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. We're actually about 15 or 16 lines down. We were talking about the liver, and the suggestion of the Gemara was that even though the liver is saturated with blood, as long as it's the blood of the liver contained within the liver, it's not so much a problem. It's the blood that comes out of the liver that is either usher, perhaps midirabanan or midoraisa, when it emits out of the liver. And therefore the Gemara had suggested that there's a problem in cooking other things when you cook the liver. And as we'll see, we don't even allow ourselves to cook the liver, we just roast the liver today. So Rav Bar Shava, the Gemara now tells us a story of Rav Bar Shava, Ikla Lebe Rav Nachman. He comes to Rav Nachman's house. Aisule keveda shlika v'lo achal. They brought out a boiled liver, and he refused to eat it. So Amrulei bar be'rav delagav lo achil umano Rav Bar Shava. So the attendants, Rav Nachman was very close with the Reish Galusa. He was politically very powerful. So his servants tell him that, there's some outside scholar who's refusing to eat what we're putting in front of him, and his name is Rav Bar Shava. Amar lahu Rav Nachman gamo l'shava. And Rav Nachman said, force feed him. Shtup him with it. In other words, make him eat it. So kitanai. So, whether or not that actually happened, we don't know. But Rav Nachman was just trying to assert his position, that it's perfectly kosher. And of course, the Gemara says, boiled liver is a machlokes tanoim. Rabbi Eliezer omer hakaved oseres ve'eno ne'eseres mipnei shepoletes ve'eno bolas. We had seen this position yesterday. That when you're boiling a liver, the blood is constantly being emitted outwards, one direction out of the liver, and does not absorb back in. And therefore it's perfectly kosher. Now Rabbi Shmuel beno shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka omer, mituvelas oseres v'ne'eseres, shluka oseres v'ne'eseres. And Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, says that if in any way the liver has been spiced, so that tenderizes the tissue of the liver, then that will cause it to reabsorb the blood, even when it's boiling. And furthermore, and that's, by the way, true, even if it's not being completely boiled, but even if it's partially cooked. And if it's being completely boiled, that will also tenderize the tissue of the liver and will cause the blood to be absorbed back in, and therefore it's a problem. Rabba bar Rav Huna ikla lebei Rabba bar Rav Nachman aisi lakame tlasavi tachoy. Amar lahu mihava yadisu da'asina. So Rabba bar Rav Huna once came to the house of Rabba bar Rav Nachman, and as we'll see from the story, he was a guest on Shabbos. It was a Shabbos meal that they were bringing out to him, and they bring out 3 sa'as of the finest flour baked challahs that are coated in honey and oil, mamish beautiful bread that you would not normally eat at a regular meal. So he said to them, how did you know that I was coming, that you would prepare such a festive, lavish meal? So Amar Lulei mi adifas lan mina dichsiv v'karasa l'Shabbos eineg. So they sort of burst his bubble. They said, are you any better than the Shabbos queen? The Shabbos is the reason why we made this bread. You thought we made it for you.
We do it every week.
We do it every week. We have, because there's a mitzvah to have eineg Shabbos. So sorry to disappoint you, Rabbah, but we didn't make this bread for you. We made it for Shabbos.
That's where challah comes from. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we just eat regular bread.
Adahachi ashka chahu keveda dahava basimpona de belia. So while they're dining on this delicious bread, Rabba also notices that they're serving a liver, a cooked liver, or a roasted liver could be. It seems from the story that it was roasted, that the portal vein, that's what one of the doctors told me earlier, that the major vein that runs through the liver is called the portal vein, and it was still intact, and it was filled with blood, cooked blood. And so, the belia dama, so Amar lahu amai avdisu hachi. So Rabbah said, why are you doing that? You shouldn't be serving the liver in its intact state with that vein filled with blood. Amrulei elahechi navid. So they said, well, how should we prepare it? So Amar lahu kiru shesi va'era v'chitucha l'sachas. So he said to them, and here it's clear from Rashi that we're talking about only roasting and not cooking. He said what you should do is you should slice the liver open in an X form, shesi va'era, crisscross, and then when you roast it, have the cut portion facing downwards,
Right.
so that all the blood, including the blood that's in the vein,
Drain out.
will drain out. Okay. V'hani mili kveda abal tichla shumna ba'almahu. But that's only necessary when you're roasting a liver. But when you're roasting a spleen, another old country delicacy, I think caterers can still make you spleen today. I don't remember what they call it. Is that called sweetbreads, I think? Yeah. But they said that that's only true that you have to cut open the liver to let it drain. But if you don't have to cut open a spleen when you're roasting it, because anything that drains out of it is fat, and it's not forbidden. And therefore, if some of it remains in, it's nishkaferla.
It's not blood.
It's not blood. Ki ha de Shmuel avdilei tavshila de tachli biyom David milsa. And they used to make a spleen for Shmuel on the day when he would let blood. I guess maybe it replenished some of his energy on the day that he would do a bloodletting. So,
Amen.
okay, Itmar. Keveda iluye bisra shari, damra mishrak sharik. Kechala iluye bisra asur, my taima chalav seruche masrich. So the Gemara now creates a contrast, and it's talking about roasting liver versus roasting kechal, the udder. Okay? And in both cases, you're talking about, the practice was, as Rashi explains, they would, in the oven, they would have a vertical spit, like a shawarma spit?
Yeah.
Okay? So they would put different pieces of meat on the vertical spit, and they would roast it. So if you put a piece of meat on first, and then you put on top of that a piece of liver, the Gemara says it's okay. Why? Why is it okay? Because when the blood drains out and it goes on the meat, it'll slide off of the meat and won't absorb into the meat. But if you put an udder on top of a piece of meat, the milk, because of its softness, will absorb into the meat. And that's, even though it's only an Isser Derabanan, it's not good so you'd have to get rid of the milk. You wouldn't be allowed to let the milk drain into another piece of meat. Now, Rav Dimi Naharda Masni Ibcha, Kechala iluye bisra shari my time achalav shchuta derabanan, keveda iluye bisra asr dam de oraisa. But Rav Dimi says just the opposite. He says the udder is okay because at worst all you have is an isser derabanan because the milk is really kosher that's in the sacks of the udder. Mm-hmm. And therefore, whatever small amounts absorb into the meat is the rabbanan were not machmir. But with liver, he holds that even the blood that's in the liver is an isser deoraisa of dam, of blood, and therefore you can't let it roast on top of meat. And by the way, that's how we paskin. When you roast liver, it has to be roasted alone without anything else. Nothing else can be roasted with it. And Rashi also points out that this is only a halacha. There's basically what's inferable from the Gemara is that if you put the meat on top and the liver on the bottom, then that would be okay, because then the blood would drain out from the bottom and it wouldn't affect the meat. But Rashi says that's only in those days when they used vertical spits. He says today we grill with horizontal spits, and that's going to be a problem because you may inadvertently tilt it so that the liver will drain onto the meat, and that's going to be a problem. Now, and Dorash Maremar, Hilchasa ben Kveda ben Kechala Tute Bisra Shari Iluye Bisra Di Evid In Lechatchila Lo. And therefore Maremer paskins that when you're dealing with the vertical spit back in those days, whether it's liver or whether it's udder, if it's underneath the meat and the meat is on top, then of course it's okay, it's not a problem. But if the liver or the udder is on top and the meat is on the bottom, both cases lechatchila it's aser, but b'di'eved, since it's only an isser derabanan, it's going to be okay. Rav Ashi ikla lebei Rami bar Abba Chamua chazi lebrei de Rami bar Amma deka shapid kiveda iluye bisra. So Rami bar Chama comes to his shver's house, and he notices that his brother-in-law, Rami bar Chama's son, is roasting on a vertical spit with the liver on top and the meat on the bottom. So Amar Kama Yohir Haimirabanan Amar Damarabanan Di'evid Lechatchila Mi Amar. And he criticized his brother-in-law. He says how arrogant that is. What right do you have to do that? The Chachamim were only lenient b'di'evid, but Lechatchila you can't be mekel. V'ika beidugi bisra ilu yekveda nami aser. So, and then the Gemara says further, if there's a beidugi in that spit, in that barbecue, now what is a beidugi? Rashi says it's a trap that they would place underneath the spit to catch all of the juices so that they could use it as a basting or like a gravy. So if you have a trap to catch all of the juices, so then even if the liver is on the bottom, you can't use those juices because you're getting blood coming out of the liver. Umaishnami dama de bisra shachein dama shachein dama dekeveda. I'm sorry, de bisra shachein dama dekveda kafi. So the Gemara says, why then is it okay to have a trap and use the gravy when meat is roasting? Now, by the way, when we're talking about roasting meat, we're not talking about where the meat was salted first, because there are two ways to remove blood from meat. One is through salting, and the other way is through roasting. So, and by the way, in halacha, roasting is a more effective way of extracting blood from a piece of meat than salting it is. It's a preferred method. So what we're saying over here is that even though you haven't koshered a chunk of meat and you put it on a spit and the juices come running out and they fall into the trap, you're still allowed to use it. Why? So the Gemara says, here's the difference. With the juices that come out of the meat, the fat and the blood separate very evenly, and the fat settles to the top. In the doogie, right? So then all you need to do is just scrape off the fat, and you can use that, and you leave the blood and discard it. But when it comes to liver, the juices that come out of a liver is not fat; it's just blood and maybe other liquids, and the blood rises to the top. And therefore, since it's not as separable, it's not separatable as much as with meat, so therefore we don't allow you to use it at all. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel. Now we go to a new sugya, which has to do with utensils that have been used with substances. Sakin sheshachat ba'asr lachtoch ba'roseach. So if you have a knife that you shechted with, the view in halacha of a shechita is that even though the animal's neck is not warmer than the body temperature of the animal, we assign it the status of roseach, that it's hot like an oven, because the blood is flowing very forcefully, and with a combination of the movement of the blood and the animal's body temperature, it's like the heat of an oven, and therefore the blood absorbs into the essence of the knife, into the material of the knife, the metal of the knife, and therefore you cannot use this knife to cut things that are hot. Like if you have a hot piece of meat, you want to use this knife now in the carving station, that would not be okay, because the heat will cause the blood that's absorbed into the knife to emit into this meat, and therefore you're going to have a problem of dam. But sonein amri la bo'i hadacha, v'amri la lo bo'i hadacha. But if you want to use the shechita knife to cut something cold, let's say a cold piece of meat, so some say you'd need to first wash off the knife. You'd need to, after slicing the meat, you would need to rinse it off, because at least of some surface residue that's on the shechita knife. And others say that once you cut the meat, you don't have to wash it off, because you don't even have to worry about surface residue. Now, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Ka'ara shemalach ba'basar asr lechol ba'roseach. Now, in the same vein, Shmuel says that if you have a plate or a tray that you used for salting a piece of meat to kosher it, to remove its blood, so the salt has the same quality as heat. It's going to cause the blood that is seeping out of the meat to absorb into the plate, and therefore, if you cannot use this plate in the future to eat something hot on it, because the absorbed blood through the heat of the piece of meat or the CHULLIN, whatever is on it, is going to cause the blood to seep out of the plate and into the hot meat. Ushmuel l'taimei da'amar Shmuel maliach hariyu kirosech v'kabosh hareikim mevushel. And Shmuel is consistent because he says that the introduction of salt or brine into a system is the same as introducing heat or boiling water into a system. Ki asa Rabin Amar Rabbi Yochanan maliach eno kirosech v'kabosh eno kimevushel. And Rabin came along and he quoted Rabbi Yochanan as saying that salt and brine are not like heat. And therefore, you don't have to worry about it. If I salted meat to get out the blood in a plate, I could use that plate with hot dishes, no problem. So Amar Abaye Hada Rabin Lesa. So Abaye says Rabin messed that up. He did not get. He must not have heard Rabbi Yochanan correctly. And I'll prove it to you because Dehahi Pincha Dehave Be Rabbi Ami Demolach Be Bisra V'Tavre. Because Rabbi Abba once had an earthenware tray that he used to salt meat and remove the blood. And after he did it, he broke the tray and he threw it away. Now, why? Because obviously he held that you couldn't use it because of the absorption of the blood that is a result of the salt. Mechdi, Rabbi Ami Talmud de Rabbi Yochanan Hava, my time atavri, lav mishum de shamia, limine de Rabbi Yochanan, damar maliach, hariu kiroseach. It must be, now Rabbi Ami was a student of Rabbi Yochanan. So he wouldn't have been so machmir to break that earthenware tray unless he had heard from Rabbi Yochanan that it's a problem because of the salt, which is treated like heat, the blood is absorbed into the walls of the tray. So that proves that Rabbi Yochanan also is machmir. Now, Yosef Rav Kahana, Achuha de Rav Yehuda, Kamei de Rav Huna, v'Yosefu ka'amar. So Rav Kahana, Rav Yehuda's brother, sitting in front of Rav Huna and says as follows, Ka'ara shemolach babasar, asr lechel bo roseach, that if you have a plate or a tray that was used for salting meat, you're not allowed to eat hot foods, just like we said before. And then he adds on and he says, Utsanon shechaschu besakin muter la'achlo bekosach, bekutach. He says, if you have a radish, now a radish is sharp, so we know that by sharp things like onions, if you cut it, they assume the status of the item that you use to cut it. So if you use a fleishig knife to cut an onion, the onion now becomes a fleishiga onion, right? If you use a dairy knife to cut an onion or a radish, that becomes dairy, right? So we know that halacha, right? So, but he says like this, if I take a fleishiga knife that I use to cut meat and I cut a radish with it, I'm allowed to eat that radish with my kutach, which is my, like we talked about yesterday, it's that disgusting dip that is made from sour milk and breadcrumbs. So it's a dairy dish. It's used it like a dip for vegetables and bread and stuff like that. So you're allowed to eat it with kutach. Now, my time, Amar Abaya, hay hetera bola v'hay isura bola. So what's the reason? Even though the radish is now a fleishiga radish, but when it absorbed the meat, it absorbed permissible meat. There was no forbidden substance because meat unto itself is permitted. And therefore we can be lenient and allow you to eat the radish even together with milchiks. So Amarle Rava Kibola Hetera Mai Havi Sof Hai Hetera Dasi Lidei Yisurahu Di Yisura Ka'achil. So Rava says, I don't get your svara, Abaye. I grant you that when the radish absorbed the flavor of the meat, it absorbed permissible flavor. But Lamaisa, when you're going to eat it with milchiks, it's usher. It's fleishiks and milchiks together. How can you permit that? So therefore, Ella Amar Rava, Hai Efsher Lemit Amei, Vahai Lo Efsher Lemit Amei. If you're going to draw any distinction between knives that are used for shchita, which absorb blood, which is clearly usher, and fleishich knives that absorb permissible flavor of meat, the way to make a distinction is as follows. If the radish has the flavor of meat, then clearly you cannot eat it with milk. The issue is, how do you determine whether the radish has the flavor of meat or not? Mm-hmm. So there we can be more lenient because you can just nibble on the radish before you dip it in the kutach to determine whether it tastes like meat or not. With a radish that is cut with a shchita knife, you don't have that luxury of tasting it because it may have forbidden blood flavor. And forbidden blood flavor is not permitted to a yid. So you'd always have to be machmir if you cut anything with a shchita knife to discard that item that you cut. You wouldn't have the opportunity to taste it to see if it has the flavor or not. But with a radish that was cut with a fleishika knife, that you want to eat the radish now with milchik, so you can just taste it. That's the distinction. Amarle Rav Papa Rava, Velit ame kfeila arma. So Rav Papa says to Rava, that distinction also doesn't hold. Because I grant you that a knife that was used for shchita has forbidden blood, and it could have gotten out into the radish, so fine, a yid can't taste it, but give it to a Gentile culinary expert, and let that Gentile expert taste it, and he'll tell you whether it has the flavor of blood in it or not. And by the way, the reason why you need an expert is, this is brought down in the poskim, is because he has his reputation on the line. If I give, what's one of those master chefs? Who are some of the famous chefs today in the world? Oh, come on, guys! No one watches these shows.
Our wives do. I don't.
Yeah. Anyway, one of these famous chefs, if he tastes it, he has his reputation. Of course, he's going to try and detect the flavor.
Right.
He's not. If he tells you, "I can't taste anything," you're going to say, "Oh, you're an Amaretz. You don't know flavor. You're not a connoisseur, right?" So therefore, that's why you got to give it to an expert. So the point is that there still is no distinction, because a Yid can taste the fleishich radish, and a Goy expert can taste the blood-infused radish. Milo tnan keder shabishal babasar lo yavashal b'chala v'im bishal b'no sein tam. Look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that if you have a fleishich pot, you're not allowed to cook dairy in it, and if you did b'di'eved, then b'no sein tam. Then you have to see if the flavor is detectable in the milk. Bishal batruma lo yavashal b'chulin v'im bishal b'no sein tam. And if you cooked, if you have a pot that's used for truma, and you want to use it now to cook something that a Yisrael can eat, don't cook it in that pot. And if you did b'di'eved cook it in that pot, you have to see if there's flavor detectable from the original truma, and if so, then it'll only be permissible to kohanim. The Amrinan, and in the commentary of that Mishnah, we say bishlam truma ta'im la kayin elabasar b'chalav man ta'im la. He says, I can understand if you want to know if flavor is detectable of the original truma in this now chulin food that you just cooked in the truma pot, just give it to a kohen to taste. He'll be able to tell you. But who's going to taste the dairy dish to see if there's a meat flavor? A Jew is not allowed to taste it because he may be eating treif. So va'amar lan litamek feila, hachanami litamek feila. So the Gemara says, so the answer that we said over there was, get a Gentile expert and ask him to taste the mac and cheese and see if there's any meat flavor in it. And the same thing over here. If I have a knife that was used for shchit and I'm worried about absorbed blood and I cut a radish with it, just have a Gentile taste it and see if there's any flavor in it. So why is there any distinction between a knife that's used for fleishichs and a knife that's used for blood? So the Gemara says, Hachanami ki ka'amina deleka kfela. So Rava said to him, I agree with you. But what I'm saying is a distinction in what situation where there's no Gentile available. I can't find Chef Boyardee or whoever these people are. I can't find anyone to taste the radish. So when I can't find anyone to taste the radish, then there's a very important distinction between a radish that was cut with a meat knife versus a blood knife. If it was cut with a blood knife, I have to discard the radish because no one can taste it. I don't have anyone available. But when I cut a radish with a fleishicha knife, just taste it and see if it has a meaty flavor before you dip it in the kutach. Let's go weiter. Itmar. By the way, this is not halacha l'maisa. Just want to reassure you. Now, Itmar. Dagim sha'alu b'ka'ar Rav Amar asur la'achlin b'kutach u'Shmuel Amar mutar la'achlin b'kutach. Very important sugya. This is now called the sugya of not bar not. Anyone ever hear that terminology? Not bar not? No sein tam, bar no sein tam. Now, what does it mean? We know that when a food absorbs something directly from another food, that food was no sein tam, gave flavor into the other food. Like if you're cooking a liver with, or you're cooking meat next to a piece of cheese, so then the cheese absorbs directly the flavor of the meat. But what if you are cooking something in a pot? The meat went into the walls of the pot, and then later on, you're going to cook something that is dairy. Or you're going to cook something that is parv. And now you want to be able to use the parv item with dairy, or you want to cook it with dairy. So in that situation, do you have to worry about no sein tam or not? So this is one more step removed, because the fish received flavor from a pot, so it's got indirect flavor from meat. Doesn't have direct flavor from the meat. And so therefore there's an argument to be made, and this is what Shmuel says, is that you can have the fish together with a hot dairy dish because it only received the flavor from the meat indirectly. Big machlokus between Rashi and Tosfos whether the fish was cooked in a meat pot or whether it was cooked in a parv pot and then placed on top of a fleishicha dish. But either way, what we're talking about is an indirect infusion of flavor into the fish.
The question is, fleishic fish, can you have it with milk?
Right. So Rav says no, and Shmuel says yes. Rav Omar Aser no sein tamu. Shmuel Omar Mutter no sein tam bar no sein tamu, not bar not. So Rav says it's giving off the fish has the flavor of meat, so you can't have it with milk. But Shmuel says no, it's got the flavor of meat, the son of flavor of meat. In other words, it's an indirect flavor. It's one step removed, and therefore you can have it with milk. Okay. Now, v'hod Rav lav beferish itmar ela michlala itmar. Huh?
What do we hold?
We'll see in a second. Rav's statement was not said explicitly, but it was inferred from the following story. And as the Gemara will point out, this story was misinterpreted. And therefore, even Rav agrees that you can be lenient with not bar not. The Rav ikla lebe Rav Shimi bar Chia bar Berei chash be'ena of Avdulei Shaifa bitza. So Rav once went to the house of Rav Shimi, and Rav Shimi's grandson had an eye infection. So they made some kind of ointment from chemicals, from herbs or whatever, and they put it in his eye, and then they washed off the plate, and they served meat on it to Rav. Okay? So basar hachi ramule bishula begava, time le time de shaifa. And Rav said, "Oh, I can taste the ointment in this dish." So Amar Yoav time kule hai. He said, "Wow, it really gives off a potent flavor." So they wanted to infer from that story that even though this was not bar not, you see that even though it was an indirect infusion of flavor from the salve, from the ointment, you still see that you have to contend with not bar not. So, but velohi shiny hasam denafish meraret fe. But the Gemara says that's not the correct inference. There, the ointment was particularly bitter. It had a very, very pungent bitterness to it. And that's the reason why it's still transferred over to the meat. But with normal meat and milk, it's an exception. But with normal meat and milk, you don't have to be machmir so much. So if you want to ask halach lamaisa, we do hold of this leniency of not bar not, but the applications are limited. I'll give you an example. If you're drinking a glass of tea in a fleishicha cup, and you accidentally took a milchika spoon and stirred the tea in the fleishicha cup. So that's only a problem of not bar not at worst, because the spoon is not absorbing flavor directly from the walls of the teacup. It's absorbing flavor that may have been emitted into the tea. So it is such an indirect transfer that you can be lenient. You know this designation in many kashrus agencies of DE, dairy equipment. That's also, there's also not bar not, and you can be makel. We're not makel to let you eat it mamash with meat, but you can eat it immediately after meat. So there's different designations of not bar not and when you can be makel. Now, Rabbi Elazar havakoyim kameidim ar Shmuel, aisu lekame dogim shalu b'ka'ara v'ka'achel b'kutach, yahiv lei v'lo achal. So Rabbi Elazar was once by the great Shmuel, and they bring out to Shmuel fish that had been placed on a fleishicha dish, and they wanted him to, and Shmuel ate it with his kutach dip, his milchika kutach dip. They offered some to Rebbe Lazar, and he declined. So Amar lei l'rabcha yehivi lei va'achal va'at lo achalt. So Rebbe Lazar is Shmuel is a little bit insulted. He says, I gave to your Rebbe Rav, and he ate it, so why shouldn't you eat it? Why are you so more frum than your Rebbe? So Asa lekame de Rav Amar lei hader beimar mishmaite. So Rebbe Lazar comes before his Rebbe Rav, and he says, Rav, did you retract your initial statement that you're machmir with not bar not, and that you don't eat it? So Amar lei chas le lazari da abba bar abba de lisfili midi velo svirali. So he says, chas v'shalom, that the great Shmuel would offer me food that he knows l'shitasi that I wouldn't eat, and he would give it to me. So basically, the way Rashi learns is, Lo hayu dvarim me'olam. It never happened the way Shmuel told you that he fed me fish from a fleishicha plate with dairy. Never happened. Would never happen, because Shmuel would never do that to me. Put me in a position where he holds its mutter and he knows that I hold its usher and feed it to me.
He's not calling him a liar. He's just saying.
He's basically saying that Shmuel, who told you that he gave it to me, he never offered this to me. This never happened. Well, something's going on. I'm not sure.
Was it Shmuel that said it to him, or was it
someone else who said it? That's why I'm asking.
Got the story wrong.
Maybe the other guy who thought he heard it.
Is it possible? Maybe.
Told you that didn't happen.
It just says Aleph Lamed, doesn't say.
Could be another guy. That never happened.
You think so? Maybe. Could be. Maybe. He says in the footnote, Ayin b'sefer be'er sheva. Also, this story goes against what we just said before, that Rav is makel with Nat Barnat. So the whole story is a little bit fishy. No pun intended. Anyway. V'Rav Huna v'Rav Chia bar Ashi haviyasvi chad b'haigisa demavra desura v'chad b'haigisa demabora. So these two sages are sitting on two sides of the river that is running through Surah. Okay? And Lamar Aisule Dogim Shalu Bikar Va'achal Bekutach, Lamar Aisule Te'enim Vanovim Besochasuda Va'achal V'lo Brich. So each one did something which to the other was controversial, which was problematic. So one rabbi on one side of the river ate fish that had been placed on a fleishicha plate or cooked with fleish on a fleishicha pot and ate it with kutach. And the other fellow, right, not barnat. And the other one was brought in the middle of his bread meal, they brought him figs and grapes, and he ate them without making a bracha. Now that's all. That's supposed to say bori pri ha'etz on fruit, even if they bring it to you in the middle of the meal, but if it's something that's not eaten with bread, we paskin that you're supposed to make a separate bracha. The hamotzi doesn't cover it. So each one did something that was problematic to the other. So Mar Amar Le Lechavre Yasama Avad Rab Chahachi. Umar Amar Le Lechavre Yasama Avad Rab Chahachi. So one guy says to the other, "You orphan." In other words, you bereft one without a teacher. Did your Rebbe teach you to do this? And the other one says to the other one the very same thing. You orphan. Did your Rebbe teach you? Did your Rebbe do this?
They're insulting each other.
So they're insulting each other. So Mar Amar Le Lechavre Ana Kishmul severely. So the one who was eating the fish with the kutach says, well, I hold like Shmuel. Not Barnat is okay. And Amar Amar Le Lechavre, Anak Reb Chia Svirali, Datani Reb Chia, Pas Poteres Kol Minei Machel, V'yain Poter Kol Minei Mashkin. And the other guy said, the reason why I didn't make a bracha on the figs and the grapes is because I hold like Reb Chia, who says that once you make hamotzi, then even fruit is covered. And once you make a bori pri hagafen on wine, all beverages are covered. You don't have to make a separate bracha on any other beverage. And so as far as what the halacha is, as far as the way the Gemara is going to conclude, we'll wait on that for tomorrow's Gemara. Have a wonderful